I really don't like product rumors, but let's imagine for a moment that Apple does a wink to the past, and instead of one, introduces 3 revolutionary products: a smart toothbrush, an e-scooter, and a breakthrough flower pot. So no question that all of these are going to run your apps, right? So they need apps for this. Good morning. Hi. How are you? Yeah, we're ready to go now. Okay. All right, if clicker works, amazing. All right, my name is Marin Todorov. I've been building software for 20 plus years. I've been building on Apple's platform since 2009. Most recently, I did some work for Apple for a few years. That was a lot of fun. And most recently, I've been kind of like on a hiatus, building things for fun with SwiftUI, actually. And these few projects that I've been building on last year with SwiftUI is what brings me this morning on stage. Yeah, SwiftUI. It's pretty good. It's SwiftUI, you know, like SwiftUI. Yeah. Actually, while you're still fresh in the morning and still pretty excited about everything, I'm going to try something that I wanted to try for a long time on stage. So let's try this. So when I say Swift, you say UI. Okay, let's give this a try a few times. And we're going to do this until I feel that you're sufficiently excited about SwiftUI. All right. So let's give it a try. Swift. UI. Swift. UI. Objective-C. Kind of, yeah. So there was really no framework like SwiftUI for Objective-C, was there? Like, also for Swift, there wasn't a framework just like SwiftUI before SwiftUI. And in fact, let's quickly jump some years back to the ways that we were building UI before. So when I was about 15 or 16, I had to build this inventory app. Boring stuff. But to do this, I had to build both a database and a UI library because at the time, there was no things like this boxed in that came, ready for you to use. So it looks something like this. This is not an actual screenshot, but like this was kind of like the style of the time for UI, and like run in a text mode, and but it was pretty exciting. And what I want to say about this is that it was pretty easy to build UI for such a clearly defined target environment. Like it was like text only, and it was only one resolution. You had full control of the keyboard. You could draw everything yourself. It was pretty easy. There was like one linked list with components. And you just drew them all on screen by printing, basically, at given locations. You had control of the keyboard, so where the user would switch controls, you just moved the cursor to that location, that was it. So, you had all the control you wanted. You can do anything you want. It was pretty easy to do this. In fact, the UI and the apps were running so close to the hardware that the only way to run a timer was to tap into something called a hardware interruption. And the only interval it ran at was 50 milliseconds, so you had to do your own math to see what you want to do at this precise interval. It was a lot of fun. So if this feels like something you want to try for fun, this is actually a Swift library by Miquel de Casa. It's called TermKit. So for a weekend project, you can grab this and build like some old-style terminal apps with text, UI, and Swift. But sometime later, I started building graphical interfaces, and it was a huge leap forward, it felt like, compared to building text UI. So graphical interface came, like if you ever used Visual Basic or Delphi, in the early times, maybe few of you maybe, it came with a whole lot of components ready to go. And this was it felt so great because some smart people developed something really powerful, and you could just grab it and use it and build things really quickly. But you had to give a little bit of control to do this. You couldn't draw things yourself. you didn't have to draw things yourself. You didn't have to manage all the input. All of these things kind of like were offloaded to somebody that did it in advance, and you can just like use these things. But again, it was still rather close to the hardware specifically. There was not much variance in the CPUs that you're going to run on. There was not so much variance in the operating system that you're going to run on. Not so much in the inputs or the screen resolutions for that matter. But then again, afterwards, I started building for the web. And so the web was another huge leap forward and another kind of like giving control even further, because the web browser was its own platform. A lot of things were, predefined how they work and how they reach people, but you could reach a much wider audience. Like suddenly you could just, your thing could run like for people on Linux, Windows, and Mac, and it didn't really matter. Like all these things didn't really matter. You can reach all of them. So you gave up even more control, but like you got even more back for doing that. And the interesting thing is, especially, at first with the web, we wanted to build our old fully custom UI because we could, yeah, technically possible. But the interesting thing was that user feedback was that they really, most of them didn't want that because their browser were already doing this. So the browser already taking their system language in account, their left to right, right to left affordance, was displaying the right controls for their operating system. For Mac users would see their Mac controls and so forth and so forth. So we delegated UI controls to the browser, into the system, into the platform, and we focused on semantically building the UI with HTML, styling with CSS. But enough about the past. Let's talk about now. Building UI with Xcode is a joy. Yes. Well, I mean, there's a whole myriad of ways to do it, and most of them are their own UI paradigm. You have their own quirks. They vary in successfulness between platforms, so it's a lot of things. And you might think it's a little weird that we have to think so much about UI even before we create the project. But it kind of like makes sense. When Xcode came out, this was the kind of like the hardware and the environment that developers were targeting, right? These are the 4 products that Apple focused for relaunching the company, basically. The personal laptop, the professional laptop, and the personal desktop, and the professional desktop. So these 4 things. And you can see that there's no much variance, right? Like there's similar screen resolutions and similar CPUs and operating system, and not much variance. And it made sense to also bind the UI kind of experience to this, so that you can have the perfect UI because you knew pretty much where you're going to be running. Right. And Cocoa is a fantastic framework to build beautiful UIs with, right? Like this is a low screen, a low-resolution screenshot from macOS to adhere to the fair usage licensing for this, but it was beautiful in full resolution at the time. But I mean, Cocoa has been in one or another form for what, 30, 35 years? I mean, the thing has grown legs. Every class has 100 properties, and they're all called something like, should divider be drawn when the mouse is hovering view? Or left shift pressed in combination with touch bar where available represents mouse event. And you got to set this to 6 to properly work. And so, this happens with time, right? Like time makes perfect, but also adds 100 properties to every class. And, when the iPhone came out, quite a different screen, quite a different ratio of the screen and resolution, and pretty much everything was different. So it kind of like the right thing to do was to fork code, and UIKit mostly, copied things from AppKit, but it also had its own things added, easy. But it quickly became a problem because unlike AppKit, UIKit quickly experienced like a whole bunch of screen ratios and orientations and resolutions and user input and all this kind of things. So, this is my simulator list after I groomed it to only the bare bones. So this is kind of like the resolutions that you gotta care about if you wanna look good. And so many new APIs were added that Apple had to migrate some things back to AppKit, right? Like developing here, developing there, and then just trying to sync them, and it's a whole thing. If only we had a smart UI framework that solves all of these problems, right? Well, we got it. It's auto layout, right? Like auto layout is going to solve it through a system, through a simple system of equations. You can mathematically express your UI, how it should look like, and be laid out. It kind of worked for when there were like 5 devices, but that definitely didn't prove that it's something that's going to scale, because guess what happened next? Hello, Apple TV. Should we run AppKit on it because of the large screen? Should we run UIKit on it because it doesn't have a keyboard? Maybe, well, yeah. The best way maybe is to fork UIKit, make another thing, bind to the hardware and to the screen size and inputs, and that's going to work. For sure, because, I mean, yeah, we ended up with this. Today, like, if you want to build for tvOS, it's SwiftUI or TVML and TVMLKit or TVUIKit and UIKit. It's a lot. And, but that's going to be it, right? Like, this is it. We're going to be building for macOS, iOS, tvOS. We're going to have 3 kind of like UI libraries that are bound to the hardware, some kind of forks of the operating system, and we're going to share some code, but most of it actually is going to be bound to the, controlling our views. If only we had a smart UI framework that will solve all of these problems. Well, maybe we don't need one, right? Like, maybe that's it, because how many more revolutionary devices can Apple come with? Oh, wow. Someone said that they're too lazy to pick up their iPhone out of the pocket and see the time, so now we have also the watch. And the watch is amazing. We work really hard on it. Yeah, it's great. It talks to the satellites and everything, but what about the UI? And so the UI team is thinking, we shouldn't make another UI library. This is getting too much. We already have 3. We don't need a 4th. So how about extensions? Extensions are going to be the way that we're going to ship UI to the phone, to the watch, sorry. If only we had a smart UI framework that solves all of these problems. And developers at the same time are in crisis, in identity crisis. Are they iPhone developers? Are they tvOS developers? Are they UIKit developers that target extensions? Like, everything is similar, but not exactly the same, because it's bound to the hardware. And if you're a pro in UIKit, you can pretty much build an AppKit application as well for the Mac, right? But only somebody who's been on the Mac for a long, long time knows that set needs constraints to super view reevaluated on event with 7 is going to have buttons properly handle mouse over. So we're at the crossroads. Too many operating systems, too many ways to build UI for them. If only we had a smart UI framework that solves all of these problems. And so here's our savior. Let's take the most advanced UI framework that we have already, make it work on all devices, easy peasy. So running UIKit, which has the most features, properties, so to say. Let's take UIKit, make it run on the Mac. It makes sense. I think that's for sure is going to solve our problems. Well, it did help port few apps for the Mac from the iPad to the Mac, and it did help port some of the Apple apps back to the Mac as well. But as long as we're not adding more screens and more kind of like input ways and more platform availabilities and things like that, we should be good. Now we just stop adding complexity to the platform matrix. Until someone complained that their Intel laptop is too hot and slow. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the most awesome iPad chip, stick it in the MacBook, and problem solved. But now we have also iPhone apps running natively on the Mac, and these just break everything dear and near to Mac users, because when you want to try to resize one of those running on your Mac, it actually turns around the orientation of the app. it's not bound to this kind of hardware and inputs, and it kind of like breaks the UI. If only we had a smart UI framework that solves all of these problems. So let's finally talk about SwiftUI. SwiftUI. Swift, you remember from the way back in the beginning? Yeah, SwiftUI, all right. So with SwiftUI, nothing needs to feel out of place, right? It's not bound to the hardware. It wraps the frameworks that are bound to the hardware, so you can pretty much use abstraction to build the UI, and it's really good. As a free bonus, you can discard your view controllers. I mean, only that would be just enough. It's a brave new world. SwiftUI, it solves all of the problems that I intentionally built talking about. Yes? No. If there are any specific platform problems, they're still there. They're on the platform. Additionally, as any large framework, SwiftUI also adds some problems of its own. It's easy to misinterpret what SwiftUI is and assume that it's here to replace UIKit or AppKit. I don't think these are going to be sent to pasture anytime soon. I mean, this is probably not a smart choice to make these bold statements just so close before WWDC, but I mean, I'm halfway through the talk, so I'm just going to keep going. So in my point of view, SwiftUI promotes better code. It asks you to write reactive code. There is much less controlling code. There is no observe this, observe that, synchronize them. There is the model change or view, whatever. It promotes better composition. It establishes data flow patterns. You interact with a lot less of API surface, so you can focus on the what, not on the how. And it's extensible. You can build as wide as you want, all the components you want, do them work every way you want. Or you can go deeper. You can, at any point, jump to UIKit or AppKit. After building a whole lot with SwiftUI in the last couple of years, I have to say it's a power you have to make use of as a developer. I personally was blown away by at least one thing in each of the projects that I worked on. It just makes building joy. So let's look at a few of the projects that I worked on last year. You can build simple stuff. You can build, in the morning I needed a tool to profile how some code runs. You can slap in a chart, an interactive table, and feed it with some data coming from somewhere else, like in no time. Build this in the morning, profile in the afternoon, solve your problem, discard in the evening if you don't need it anymore. Like, it's that easy. You can build complex UIs. Here's a Swift scripting IDE that I worked on for a while just for fun, to learn like how to do a lot of things with SwiftUI, and I can't even imagine how would I build this with AppKit in storyboards. It's, with all those inspectors and panes that are coming in and out, and you can cycle through them. They're all connected, like they all contribute to the data model and the state of the app. It's crazy. Just imagine, for this I would sometimes, play with things like, let's swap the left and the right inspectors and see like how it feels to use it like this way. With AppKit, we'll be like, all right, folks, let's put on the hard hats. Let's bring the heavy machinery. Crew over here, log the storyboard, log the storyboard. It's going to take a while. It's an endeavor into programming. And SwiftUI is just, like these lines go here, these lines go here, run, and let's see how it feels. So, it really changes things. You can build crazy things that make no sense. For example, this is a command line tool I built with Swift Package Manager, and halfway through building this for what I needed it, I thought maybe we would do with like some UI. So I added SwiftUI window to just show the GUI for it. So it's like a command line tool with GUI. And SwiftUI just lets you do it. And the problem is that you don't have to plan this in advance. You don't have to change your ways. You don't have to put on the hard hats. You can just, move a little bit of text around, and it's kind of like works. And this is one of the projects that actually I didn't build with SwiftUI. I needed the whole table view API for the main window, but every other window is built with SwiftUI, and this also works pretty nice. Not as straightforward, but it's still pretty neat. And finally, this is something that I worked on for a while. It's called a data footer. Had to change name because of trademark infringement. But you launch it alongside your simulator in Xcode, and it reads your simulator logs and shows you this beautiful debug widgets. It's pretty nice. But here, I was not blown away so much by how easy it was to build the UI. Actually, it was amazing to see how easy it is to take the whole app state and then decompose it into different smaller and more granular data models as you go deeper into the UI. So every single piece of view can be driven by the same piece of data, but implementing different logic specifically for this UI. And SwiftUI made it really easy and reasonable to do it. And none of these projects are 100% SwiftUI. Truth is, even SwiftUI is not 100% SwiftUI because it just wraps something else on the platform. So who's counting percentages? Well, SwiftUI is not a crusade, You don't have to fly the SwiftUI banner going into the office to defeat the UIKit infidels. It's a tool, it's an abstraction that helps you do your job more efficiently. And if for some reason, for some task, it doesn't help you do your work more efficiently, by all means do it with the lower level frameworks. It's really there just to help you. And in every project, at least one of the aspects of using SwiftUI blew my mind. At least one thing was either faster or more fun or made more sense, which is also a pretty good benefit. So it seems like we have our one UI framework that's going to save all our problems, yes? No. This is not a framework that's going to solve all our problems. Frankly, none of them will, right? So, just as an example, editing multi-line text, still not solved with SwiftUI. It's pretty buggy. Anyone will tell you that it's trying to build an editor with SwiftUI. Auto-completion in Xcode for SwiftUI is really not there, at least some of the time. And probably for the same reason, also documentation isn't all that great, for some parts of SwiftUI. For example, how do we present an alert box? It's just 50 overloads with, yeah. And there are many UI glitches too. I mean, how about this unreadable tooltip? Menus switch between enabled and disabled state just on their own. There's much more things. I mean, there's many things. For example, even some of the basics are broken, like scroll bars sometimes. What happened here? It just doesn't, it doesn't react to user input. Yeah, so there are many things. And this is the kind of thing that makes people ask, is it production ready? Well, do you remember left shift pressed in combination with touch bar where available represents mouse events from way in the beginning? Yeah, Cocoa also has a lot of problems that have been there for decades, but we have workarounds, and this is how we work. SwiftUI has been around for 4 years, and new people have come to the platform, learned to build apps with SwiftUI, and are already shipping apps to the App Store and have never touched, left shift represents whatever. So this is the wrong question to ask. Do I want to have to learn yet another similar but not identical SDK when the next big thing comes? Do I want to be jamming view controller code instead of working on features? Do I want to put on my hard hat and close the road and bring in the heavy machinery anytime that I want to switch a couple of views in a window? And do I want to fix a merge conflict in a storyboard ever again? No. No, absolutely not. Now, I really don't like product rumors, but this year, even I can't deny that I feel like something big is going to come out, right? Some kind of a new product. And so let's imagine for a moment that Apple does a wink to the past, and instead of one, introduces 3 revolutionary products. A smart toothbrush, an e-scooter, and a breakthrough flower pot. So no question that all of these are going to run your apps, right? So they need apps for this. Do you want to spend your summer learning a new UI API for Brush OS, Scooter OS, and Pot OS? how does that scale for Apple? How does that scale for you? No. SwiftUI is the current UI framework. You don't have all the control, and maybe you have even less control, and it's even less polished than UIKit or AppKit, but you get a lot in exchange for losing some of these control. You have to just let go of left, shift, press combination, and so on, and hope that Apple will just fix everything and make it good for you. And if they don't, there are workarounds. And who knows? Because it's an abstraction now that wraps UIKit and AppKit. Maybe on the on the brush, it will not wrap anything. It will just talk straight to the brush motor and brush display, and it will be even faster than we have it right now on the phone and on the Mac. So I took you through this whole timeline of UIs evolving forward through the years. So you can see that each time that there's a leap, there is also, you have to let go a little bit of the control for exchange of getting to new platforms, getting to more things for free, reaching more people, wider audience. And we are at SwiftUI right now. Truth is, any amount of SwiftUI is forward thinking, regardless if it's 50%, 70%, however you count them. In its 5th version, iOS was an amazing operating system. And the 5th iteration of Swift was a stable and powerful language. And SwiftUI 5 is going to be what you will be using in production to build the great app for Brush OS or anything else that Apple brings up next. Thank you. SwiftUI. SwiftUI. As an afterthought, on the flight here, I counted carefully, and this is my, believe it or not, 65th technical presentation that I give. And it's a lot. So, huge thank you to Swift Heroes for inviting me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.